Right, so get this. We're doing a deep dive into a single source today.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a juicy one, too.
Okay.
We're talking about the July 2011 issue of the Dealey Plaza Echo, a journal entirely dedicated to the JFK assassination.
Wow, focusing on just one source, like, that lets us really get into, like, the minds of those researchers,
Right.
their methods, their perspectives.
It's like we're stepping right into their worlds.
Exactly.
And inside this journal, we're going to zero in on an article called The ZAPRUDER Film Chronology by Chris Scally.
Okay.
Now, you've probably seen the ZAPRUDER film, or at least stills from it.
Right, that grainy home movie that
Yeah.
captured the
It's
assassination.
been debated endlessly.
For sure. It's incredible. Like, just a random person with a home movie camera ends up capturing one of the biggest moments in history.
Yeah, it's chilling, right?
Totally.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Scally, he dives deep into the journey of that film in the days right after the assassination.
Right.
And he asks a question that's been haunting researchers. Like, forever.
What's that?
Could this film have been altered?
Oh, wow.
And if so, when and where?
Man, that gets at the heart of how we understand evidence, especially for something like this huge.
Right.
Like, how do we even figure out what's real and what's not?
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about history on this scale. Like, how do we know if something's authentic or not?
Big questions.
Absolutely.
And to tackle these, Scally starts off by reminding us about some of the technical parts of the film itself.
Okay.
So the original film stock was in a format called 8x8,
Double eight.
which basically means you have 2 rows of 8mm wide exposures running side by side.
Oh, okay.
And after processing, it gets split right down the middle.
Okay.
And it's spliced together to make like one 50-foot roll of standard 8mm film.
Culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that difference between the original 8x8 and the standard 8mm is actually really important
How so?
because it impacts claims of potential alteration.
Oh, okay, wait. I'm a little lost. How does that work?
Well, so think about it. Making edits on 8x8 film would be super tough.
Yeah.
You would have to align, like, perfectly 2 different strips of film after making changes. And back in '63, that would have been almost impossible to do smoothly,
Oh, I see.
you know, without leaving a trace.
So if we know, like, what format the film was in at different times, we
yeah.
can see, like, if changing it was even possible back then.
Exactly.
I see.
So that's why this chronology by Scally is so important.
Okay.
He tracks the movements of the film almost hour by hour.
Wow.
Okay, so let's unpack this timeline.
Yeah.
Scally starts on Friday, November 22nd, 1963, the day of the assassination.
Right.
He follows the film from ZAPRUDER's camera to a Kodak processing plant in Dallas, and then to the Jameson Film Company where they make copies.
Okay.
Then it goes back to Kodak and finally ends up with the Secret Service that night.
Wow. It went everywhere.
Talk about a whirlwind tour.
Yeah. And, you know, to make sure everything's accounted for, Scally highlights these affidavits that ZAPRUDER himself got from Kodak and Jameson.
Okay.
They state that only 3 copies were made on top of the original.
Gotcha. So we have 4 films total.
Right.
We know where they are on Friday.
Yep.
Then Saturday, November 23rd rolls around and the FBI comes in.
Okay.
They get their hands on the film in Dallas to examine it.
Okay.
And at the same time, Life magazine jumps in,
Oh, wow.
buys the print rights, and makes black and white copies for their next issue.
Interesting.
And this is where things start to, like, spread out.
Okay.
One of those fresh copies is sent to Secret Service headquarters in Washington, D.C.
I see. So now we have copies going around.
Right.
Interesting.
And this brings us to what Scally calls the first key event in the film's journey. So late that Saturday night,
Okay.
a copy arrives at the National Photographic Interpretation Center.
NPIC.
Yeah, MPIC
Right.
in Washington.
Okay.
Secret Service agents brought it there to create briefing boards for CIA Director John McCooney.
Gotcha.
Now, MPIC, for those who don't know,
Yeah.
it was basically like the CIA's super secret photo analysis department.
Oh, wow.
They were the experts, especially during the Cold War, at analyzing images.
So, like, when NPIC gets involved with a ZAPRUDER film, you know things are serious.
Oh, yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, what were they looking for and why?
Right. And adding more fuel to that conspiracy fire, Dino Brugioni, he was the top analyst at NPIC back then,
Nice.
claimed years later
Okay.
that he actually saw the camera original at MPIC that night.
That's interesting because if you remember our talk about the film formats, that would be, like, really unlikely.
Yeah.
The camera original, which remember was in that 8x8 format was actually with Life magazine at that time.
Yeah. So maybe Brugione's memory was a bit fuzzy.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe he saw a copy and just thought it was the original.
It's possible memories can be unreliable, you know, especially with something as chaotic and stressful as that event.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we move on to Sunday, November 24th.
Okay.
We find ZAPRUDER back in Dallas.
Right.
Showing his personal copy of the film to the Secret Service.
Mm-hmm.
And based on what we know about his equipment, this copy had to be in that standard 8mm format already.
Gotcha. So that little detail is actually really helpful.
Okay.
Because it lets us track like which copies were in which format and when.
Right.
And like we said before, that format's super important when we're talking about whether the film was altered or not.
Right, right. So we have ZAPRUDER in Dallas with his 8mm copy.
Uh-huh.
And then that night, another event goes down with NPIC.
Okay.
And this one is even more mysterious.
Oh, tell me more. This is where it gets good.
All right. So a retired NPIC employee named Homer McMahon claimed that a guy saying he was Secret Service agent Bill Smith showed up at NPIC.
Bill Smith?
Yeah, with a AA copy of the film.
Wow.
Again, supposedly to make briefing boards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, McMahon's story, it raises some red flags right away.
Yeah.
First of all, there's no record of any Secret Service agent named Bill Smith.
Okay.
And then there's this weird story that this Bill Smith character told about the film being processed and copied at Kodak's Hawkeye facility in Rochester, New York.
Oh, a CIA link facility, right?
Yeah, sounds shady.
Definitely.
But research has confirmed that the camera original was never sent to Rochester. It was handled entirely in Dallas.
Oh. Okay.
So was this Bill Smith being tricky on purpose?
Right.
Or was he just, like, really mistaken?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
Scally, he dug into this whole Bill Smith thing.
Yeah.
And eventually he suggests that McMahon probably just, like, mixed up some details.
Okay.
Maybe he mistook someone else for a Secret Service agent,
Wow.
got the location wrong.
Just an honest mistake?
Maybe. It seems like the simplest explanation,
Yeah.
given what we know.
Okay, so where does that leave us?
Right.
Well, by Monday, November 25th, Life magazine got full rights to the film, including the camera original and ZAPRUDER's personal copy.
Okay.
The other two first-day copies were accounted for.
Yeah.
One was on its way back to Dallas, and the other was at Secret Service headquarters in Washington.
Okay.
And this is where Scally makes a point.
What's that?
He argues that if the film was altered, it had to happen before this point.
Right, before Monday, November 25th, when copies started to spread more widely.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Like, if you were going to mess with the film, you'd want to do it before there were too many copies floating around.
Right.
But what are the alleged alterations anyway?
Yeah, what's supposedly missing from the film we have today?
Right.
Well, there are two main events that some researchers think are missing.
Okay.
First, footage of the limousine turning onto Elm Street.
Yeah.
The film cuts straight from the motorcycles to the limo already on Elm.
It's like someone just snipped that turnout.
That's right.
And the second missing thing?
A possible 3 to 4 second stop on Elm Street.
Okay.
Just before the fatal headshot.
Wow. If those are true, those missing pieces could completely change how we see what happened.
Totally.
But could they even do that back in '63? I mean, we talked about the 8.8 format.
Yeah.
How hard it would be to edit. But what about the standard 8mm?
Yeah, the tech for film editing was definitely around.
Okay.
But the question is, could they do it perfectly without leaving any trace?
Right.
And we're talking about a very specific time frame here, like maybe just a few days. And all these different people and agencies handling those copies.
It sounds impossible.
Yeah, it would be incredibly difficult. Think about it.
Yeah.
Trying to get the film alone for long enough to make the changes and then getting it back into the chain of custody without anyone noticing.
Yeah.
And remember, everyone was already looking at this film super closely.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is where Scally's crazy detailed chronology really shines.
Yeah.
By piecing together the film's movements, like hour by hour, he shows just how small the window of opportunity for changing it really was.
Exactly. And even if someone could have pulled off the technical stuff, just the logistics of it all, the sheer number of people involved, the different locations and all the attention on the film, it makes it really hard to believe that someone could have changed it without getting caught.
So case closed then?
Well, not so fast.
Okay.
Scally leaves us with a pretty provocative question. He says that his research mainly focused on those first few days after the assassination,
Oh, okay.
But could changes have been made later?
Oh, okay.
Maybe when they were making more copies?
Like bootleg copies.
Yeah, exactly. Could one of those turn out to be the unaltered version that some researchers claim to have seen? A version showing those missing things, the limo turning onto Elm, that supposed stop?
That's mind-blowing.
Right.
Yeah.
It adds another layer of complexity to this whole mystery. Like, even if we say the first copies were real, what about what happened after?
Right.
Could the film have been messed with later on?
Wow.
And what about all the other strange things about the JFK assassination?
Yeah, there's so much more to explore.
There is, and luckily we have this whole issue of the Dealey Plaza echo to dive into.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready for more. What else is in this Dealey Plaza echo?
Well, if you're into those questions about the ZAPRUDER film, like, could it have been changed?
Yeah.
This next article might be right up your alley.
Okay.
It dives into the alleged murder weapon.
Oh.
The rifle that they say links Lee Harvey Oswald to the assassination.
Oh, yeah, the rifle. That's always a hot topic.
For sure.
So, what's the take here?
Well, it's actually, it's an excerpt from a multi-part series called Lee Harvey Oswald and the Italian Rifle by Walter F. Graff and Richard R. Bartholomew.
Okay.
And get this. They make a pretty strong argument that Oswald was framed.
Hold on, framed. Like someone else shot JFK, and they're saying Oswald was just like a patsy.
That's exactly what they're suggesting.
Wow.
And they do it by, like, really carefully taking apart some key pieces of evidence.
Okay.
They start with the purchase of the rifle itself.
Okay.
We're talking about a 6.5 by 52 millimeter Italian Carcano M9138 bolt-action rifle.
Okay.
The one the Warren Commission said was used to kill JFK.
Right.
But Graff and Bartholomew, they challenged that conclusion right away.
So how do they do that? What's their argument?
Well, they point to records that show Oswald was actually at work when the money order and order form for the rifle were supposedly mailed.
So someone else ordered the rifle in his name?
It sure seems that way.
Wow.
And it gets even deeper.
Okay.
They point out that Oswald was really good about keeping track of his time. Like, every 15 minutes or so, he'd write down what he was doing.
Okay.
The post office where the order was sent was over 6 miles from his work. And he didn't have a car. There was no bus service either.
Right.
They argue that there's just no way he could gotten there during his lunch break.
So logistically, it just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning.
Okay.
They point out that the money order, it was mailed from Dallas to Chicago, but it somehow got there the very next day.
Wow.
And get this, not only was the order filled right away,
Okay.
the rifle was shipped out that same day.
That's crazy. Even today, that seems fast.
Right. Like super speedy mail, defying all logic.
Yeah.
Graff and Bartholomew, they say that back in '63, with the time they had, that would have been impossible.
Right.
They even say that the serial number on the money order form shows it was issued in late '63, not '62 like they claimed.
So are they saying the money order could be fake?
It's definitely a possibility, according to their research.
Wow.
And it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
They also point out that the order form was messily written, which doesn't match with how neat and organized Oswald usually was. They think it was purposely made to look like his handwriting.
To frame him.
Exactly.
It's like a spy movie where nothing is what it seems.
Exactly, and the plot gets even thicker.
Sure.
They point out that they never found any bullets among Oswald's stuff. And they could only account for 4 bullets total.
So following their logic, that means Oswald never even fired the rifle before the assassination.
That's what they're suggesting.
Wow.
And then they drop another bombshell.
What's that?
Several Dallas police officers initially reported finding a Mauser rifle on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository.
Okay.
Not an Italian Carcano.
Wait, you mean in the sniper's nest?
Yeah.
Are they saying there was a completely different rifle there?
That's exactly what they're implying.
Wow.
And to make it even weirder, this Mauser just vanished.
Oh, yeah.
Never seen again.
Okay.
And to add another layer of confusion, the casings they found were from an Italian rifle.
Right.
Not a Mauser, which makes you wonder where that gun came from.
It's like someone's trying to mess with the investigation, leaving false clues.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's Marina Oswald's testimony.
Okay.
At first, she said Oswald didn't even own a rifle.
That seems like a pretty big detail to leave out.
Yeah.
Why would she do that?
Well, remember, she was Russian, new to the U.S.
Right.
She was probably scared of being deported.
Yeah.
Plus, she had a baby and a toddler to take care of.
Right.
Graff and Bartholomew, they suggest that maybe, in that situation, she was pressured into changing her story to match what the officials were saying.
So someone might have taken advantage of her.
It's possible.
To make her say what they wanted.
Yeah, and it makes you think, like, how much can we really trust what people say they saw?
Especially in a situation like that.
Exactly, when they might be scared or under pressure.
Right, yeah.
And to make Marina's testimony even more questionable, Graff and Bartholomew point out that she later said she saw Oswald shooting the rifle at Leaves.
Okay.
And even burying it in the ground.
Burying a rifle. That's kind of weird.
Right. Like, why even bother?
Yeah.
Exactly. And as if that wasn't enough, she also claimed Oswald tried to kill General Walker with the rifle.
Wait, General Walker?
Yeah.
But he had totally different political views than JFK.
Yeah, ironically.
So the same supposed assassin is going after two people with completely different beliefs.
Right. It just doesn't add up.
Something's fishy there.
It's another one of those things that makes you question the whole story.
Yeah.
And the inconsistencies in Marina's story don't end there.
Okay.
They also highlight her claim that Oswald would dry fire the rifle for hours on a porch, in plain sight, on a busy street in New Orleans.
Hold on. Dry firing a rifle for hours on a busy street.
Yeah.
That seems super risky.
Right.
And, like, not something someone trying to stay hidden would do.
Exactly. It just doesn't sound believable.
Yeah.
And Graff and Bartholomew, they pick up on that. They suggest that parts of her story were either exaggerated or just made up.
To fit the story they wanted to tell? So someone, or maybe multiple people, were working to make Oswald look guilty.
That's what they're arguing.
Even if it wasn't true.
Exactly. And then they bring in this other interesting person, Judith Very Baker, who claimed to have actually known Oswald. She said that Oswald knew a lot about rifles.
Right.
And he would never have ordered a cheap one without seeing it first.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially since the Carcano wasn't known for being a great rifle.
Right. If you know your guns, you're not going to settle for something bad, especially if you're planning something serious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to further disconnect Oswald from the rifle,
Okay.
Graff and Bartholomew talk about the fake ID card with the name A. Heidel on it.
Oh, right.
That they say was used to buy the rifle.
Yeah.
But they reveal that other people connected to the CIA also used that same fake name.
So they're implying that the rifle might not have been Oswald's at all.
Yeah, and that A. Heidel name seems to point to something much bigger.
Like involving intelligence agencies.
Exactly.
Well,
and then there's the whole thing about the paper bag.
Yeah, the paper bag.
They say they found it at the sniper's nest.
Right, the one that supposedly held the rifle?
Yeah, except there's one big problem.
What's that?
It was never photographed at the scene. And in photos taken later, they just drew dotted lines to show where they say it was.
Wait, so there's no photo proof that this important piece of evidence was actually there?
It's one of those many strange details in this case.
Wow.
And it gets even stranger.
Okay.
They found out that the bag was made from paper used at the Texas School Book Depository.
Okay.
But there were no marks from the gun on it. And it wasn't folded the right way either. Like the rifle had never been inside.
So it's almost like the bag was planted there later.
Right. Without really thinking about the details.
Wow.
And to make it even more unbelievable, they didn't find any gun oil in the bag.
Oh.
Even though they said the rifle was well oiled. Plus, there were only a few blanket fibers inside and none on the rifle itself.
Which contradicts the claim that it was wrapped in a blanket in the garage.
Exactly. If that was true, you'd expect to find more fibers on the rifle.
Right.
The evidence just doesn't match up.
It's mind-boggling. Every piece of evidence we look at just raises more questions.
And then there's the palm print.
Okay.
So they said they found a palm print inside part of the rifle.
Okay.
But they only announced it after the FBI gave the rifle back to the Dallas police.
But the FBI had the best forensics lab back then. Wouldn't they found it?
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But strangely, they didn't find any fingerprints or palm prints on the rifle at all. The Dallas police, though, said they had found a partial palm print and a partial fingerprint on the trigger guard before, but their Scotch tape supposedly took them off.
So important evidence disappears, and then new evidence shows up after Oswald's dead.
Yeah.
And he can't defend himself.
It's a pattern we see again and again in this investigation.
And then there's that whole story about Oswald eating chicken while waiting for the motorcade.
Oh, yeah, the cold-blooded killer just casually having his meal.
Right.
Yeah, that image always stuck with me.
But guess what? It was totally made up.
Oh, wow.
It was actually a black man who ate the meal there.
Okay.
Just 15 minutes before the assassination and left the bag behind.
So another fake piece of evidence to make Oswald look bad.
Exactly. Like they were trying to create a picture of a guilty man.
Yeah.
And this pattern of giving false info to the public, like a fake map showing Oswald's plan to kill JFK,
right,
it really made people believe he was guilty from the very beginning.
It's like a textbook example of how to control what people think with misinformation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And lastly, Graff and Bartholomew, they tackle how the rifle supposedly ended up in the garage at Ruth Payne's house.
Where Marina Oswald was staying.
Exactly.
Because Oswald was living in a boarding house at the time.
That's right. And while they said the rifle was with the Oswald family's things,
that were moved from New Orleans to the Payne house. Neither the Paynes nor Marina ever said they saw it.
So the murder weapon just magically appeared in the garage.
Another unexplained detail in a case full of them.
Right.
And remember, no one saw Oswald bring the rifle into the Texas School Book Depository on the day of the assassination.
So if we believe Graff and Bartholomew, the rifle was never his.
Right.
It was planted there to make him look guilty.
That's their conclusion.
It's a scary thought, like maybe what we've been told is just a carefully constructed lie.
It makes you question everything we think we know about history.
Right.
And it brings up big questions about who actually benefited from JFK's death in this cover-up.
Yeah, questions we might never have the answers to.
Unfortunately, that might be true.
But that doesn't mean we stop looking for the truth.
Absolutely not.
Well, speaking of searching for the truth, what else is hidden in this Dealey Plaza echo?
Oh, there's more.
I'm ready to keep digging.
Yeah.
Man, it's amazing how much we're finding in this single issue of the Dealey Plaza Echo.
Right.
It's like each article just peels back another layer of this whole JFK assassination thing.
Yeah.
You know, revealing more questions, more complexity.
For sure.
So, what's next on our journey?
Well, if you're into that idea of a potential cover-up, like people messing with the evidence, this next article is going to really grab you.
Right.
It's called A Report on the 9th International Seminar on the Assassination of John F. Kennedy by Stuart Galloway. And it covers like these incredible presentations from researchers who went to this seminar.
Sounds like a real who's who of JFK assassination experts.
Oh, for sure.
So what were some of the highlights?
Well, one presentation that really stuck out was by Alaric Roseman. It was called An Inexplicable 20 Minutes in Dallas. He focuses on the interrogation of Oswald. And he questions why the Dallas police handled it instead of the FBI in Washington. Yeah,
that's a great question. I mean, Oswald had already said he was a patsy. There were like hints of a conspiracy already.
Right.
You'd think the FBI, with all their resources and expertise, would have taken over.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Right.
Rosman argues that Oswald should have been under federal jurisdiction right away.
Yeah.
Especially because he hinted at working for the intelligence community.
Right. His claims about being framed, about knowing more than he was saying, should have been huge red flags.
Absolutely. But the Dallas police, they just seem to ignore all that.
Wow.
Rosman even suggests that someone, maybe even Lyndon B. Johnson himself, might have stepped in to keep the interrogation under local control.
That's a pretty big accusation.
It is.
Is there anything to back that up?
Well, Rosman points out that Johnson was a powerful guy, known for getting his way.
Right.
And remember, he took control of Air Force One right after the assassination.
Right, even before going back to Washington.
Exactly. That move didn't sit well with a lot of people in the Kennedy camp.
It definitely suggests he was already taking charge.
Right. And then there's the controversy about moving JFK's body from Parkland Hospital.
You mean the clash between the Kennedy people and the Dallas officials?
Yeah. Rosman highlights how Johnson seemed to sway everyone, convincing them that JFK's body should be flown back to Washington for the autopsy.
And wasn't there also, like, some debate about the doctors who did the autopsy at Bethesda?
Totally. Rosman points out that those doctors weren't experienced forensic pathologists, which raised questions about how accurate the autopsy was.
Right.
And all this is happening while back in Dallas, Will Fritz is interrogating Oswald, and everyone's already focused on the lone gunman idea.
It's like they were trying to fit the pieces together to support a story they already had in mind.
Exactly. And Rosman even plays a recording of Johnson calling Mrs. Tippit. The wife of the police officer Oswald was accused of killing.
So Johnson was actively shaping the narrative.
It seems that way.
Reinforcing the idea that Oswald acted alone.
Yeah, and this theme of a cover-up, of powerful people manipulating things, runs through a lot of the presentations at this seminar.
Like a constant undercurrent of suspicion.
Yeah.
Like maybe the official story is hiding something darker.
Exactly. Another presentation by Larry Hancock is called Why We Don't Know, or A Close Run Thing. He talks about these inexplicable 72 hours after the assassination.
Okay, what happens in those 72 hours?
Well, at first, there are all these reports and statements pointing to a conspiracy, backing up some of the stuff Rosman talked about. But then things change.
What do you mean?
Well, there are these weird occurrences.
Okay.
Evidence disappears. Accounts start contradicting each other.
Okay.
And there's this sudden, intense focus on making everything Oswald's fault.
So anything that might suggest a bigger conspiracy gets ignored.
Yeah.
And the lone gunman story takes over.
Exactly. Hancock gives a bunch of examples, like those lists that documented the cars in parking lots and the people at the Texas Theater.
Right.
Those were super important details that could have helped identify accomplices.
Right.
But they vanished.
Convenient.
Right. Evidence goes missing just when it could lead to a different conclusion.
Exactly.
And remember Wesley Frazier?
Refresh my memory.
The guy who drove Oswald to work that day?
Oh, right.
He insisted that the package Oswald had wasn't big enough to hold a rifle. They basically ignored him.
So any eyewitness who said something that didn't fit the official story was either ignored or silenced.
Yeah, and then Hancock drops another bombshell.
Okay.
He reveals that they actually tore up the original charges against Oswald.
Wow.
And replaced them, getting rid of any mention of a conspiracy.
They literally rewrote the charges.
Seems that way. Hancock says that people from Johnson's office called key people in Dallas, pressuring them to focus only on Oswald and drop any investigation into a wider conspiracy.
It's like someone was working behind the scenes to control everything.
Right, steering the investigation away from anything that could implicate anyone else.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole mystery around those phone calls that Oswald supposedly made to the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City.
Right. Those were used to show that Oswald had communist ties, like a motive for the assassination.
Exactly. But Hancock reveals that they later compared voices and proved those calls weren't even made by Oswald.
So someone was impersonating him.
Yeah, fake evidence was used to link Oswald to communist countries.
Wow.
Making the lone gunman theory stronger.
Right.
And taking attention away from other possibilities.
It's crazy how easily they could twist things to fit the story they wanted.
It's a classic example of that.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, Hancock talks about the disappearance of tapes and transcripts related to those calls.
Okay.
And missing records of meetings between Johnson's CIA Director John McConney and National Security Advisor George Bundy. It's like key parts of the puzzle are just gone.
It's incredibly frustrating.
Making it impossible to figure out what really happened.
Exactly. And Hancock argues that these disappearances, along with the inconsistencies in the autopsy report, the questionable handling of evidence, and the conflicting testimonies, all point to a deliberate cover-up.
It's like someone worked really hard to create a story that blamed only Oswald, hiding the truth, protecting whoever else might have been involved.
That's the picture that comes out of these presentations.
It's a reminder that history is often written by the winners.
Yeah.
And the truth can be really hard to find.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder what other secrets are still out there.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
But it's also inspiring to see these researchers, like, dedicating their lives to uncovering the truth.
Yeah.
Even with all these obstacles.
Right.
Their work really shows how important it is to question everything.
Yeah.
To be critical of the information we're given.
And to never give up on finding the truth.
It makes you realize that we all have a part to play in this.
Yeah.
You know, in looking for the truth, examining the evidence, and demanding answers.
Absolutely.
The JFK assassination is a case that just keeps fascinating and challenging us.
For sure.
And as we've seen in this deep dive, the more we learn, the more we realize how much we still don't know.
It's a case that forces us to face some uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
About power, about secrecy, and about the very nature of our history.
And while we might never have all the answers, the journey itself, the search for understanding, is really valuable.
Couldn't agree more.
So, to everyone listening out there, keep digging, keep questioning, and never be afraid to challenge the official story.
That's right.
Who knows? You might just find the piece of the puzzle that changes everything.